Well, before declaring the meeting open, on behalf of the VLGA, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country throughout Victoria and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and community. We pay our respect to the traditional custodians, their elders past, present and future, and to their culture. I declare this annual general meeting open and welcome everybody that is present. I confirm we have a quorum and I would like to welcome you all here today. I acknowledge the presence of a number of special guests, including VLGA patron Hayden Ray-Smith, AM, VLGA honorary life members, my fellow VLGA board members, councillors from VLGA member councils, partner organisations and special guest Mike Gooey, Executive Director of Local Government Victoria. I have received apologies as follows. I believe there's an apology from Councillor Grace Lavella. Catherine, have you got other apologies?
I do, Denise. I also have apologies from Councillor Mark Riley and Councillor Grace Lavella.
If anyone else has other apologies, you might like to either, if you wish to state them, or you could put them in the chat and we would appreciate that. Thank you. Please note that in regard to any matters before the meeting requiring a vote, voting is confined to members who are elected councillors and proxies who are also elected councillors from the same council as the councillor who has nominated them to be a proxy. We will be using the poll functionality of Zoom for voting. Please note there are no special items of business on the agenda for this meeting. So I'll move to item 2, which is confirmation of minutes. Minutes of the last AGM have been circulated and are available on the link via the chat. I ask that I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that the minutes of the annual general meeting held on the 18th of November 2021 be confirmed. It is desirable but not essential that the mover and seconder were present at that meeting. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please?
Louise Hill has moved.
Thank you, Louise. And a seconder, Councillor Amanda Stone. I note your hand. Thank you, Amanda. Is there any discussion from anybody present about the past minutes? You will see that the motion that the minutes of the annual general meeting held on the 18th of November 2022 be confirmed in the poll. And I ask that members vote accordingly, either for or against. Yes is for, obviously. No is against. Thank you for those who have voted. And of course, the motion was carried unanimously. I now move to the President's report, which I am very pleased to present for the 2021-22 year. It is with great pleasure that I share with you the Victorian Local Governance Association's 21-22 annual report. No one could have predicted the global pandemic our world has lived through and continues to endure these past 2.5 years. COVID-19 presented enormous disruption and challenges for our communities and the people who live and the businesses that operate within them. Once again, the local government sector took a frontline role in supporting and delivering critical services to communities throughout the pandemic. They also continue to play a significant role in emergency and disaster response and recovery efforts, supporting communities impacted by bushfires, floods and extreme weather events, all of which parts of Victoria have endured and sadly are currently enduring, particularly the floods. So it's very important that our local communities come together and support each other. Councils are facing increasing pressures and the VLGA has continued to support and work with the local government sector throughout the post-COVID recovery phase. As demonstrated in this annual report, since October 2020, local government elections, the VLGA has delivered multiple councillor induction sessions, one-on-one councillor mentoring, and an extensive range of ongoing professional development programs, including in the 2021-22 period, 2 signature fast-track councillor leadership development workshops and over 100 episodes of the VLGA Connect YouTube and podcast program series, including the highly subscribed weekly governance update and the quarterly VLGA LGIU Global Executive Panels. The 21-22 period marked the wrap-up of the VLGA's 2017 to 2022 strategic plan and the beginning of an extensive consultation process to inform the organisation's next 5-year objectives. The 2017 to 2022 strategy set 4 goals for the organisation. Firstly, advocacy and policy. Protect, advance and advocate for the importance of the role of effective local government. Secondly, local government support. Support and assist councillors to do their job well. Thirdly, good governance leadership. Provide resources, information and education and undertake projects to support good governance and leadership. And lastly, health and sustainable organisation. Be a sustainable, focused and values-driven organisation. On reflection, the VLGA board is satisfied that the organisation has effectively delivered on each of these objectives and has established a strong foundation and proposition for the future. Thank you to all who provided input during the recent consultation phase to inform the VLGA's 2022 to 2027 strategic plan. This feedback has now been consolidated, and I am delighted to advise you at this AGM that the VLGA will, over the next 5 years, further its purpose to inspire and enable good governance in elected officials by nurturing their journey from candidacy to end of term. The VLGA's vision for local government, not only in Victoria but across Australia, will be a diverse and growing network of community leaders elected to local government who are more connected, informed and capable of providing good governance for the communities they serve. That communities, economies and the environment are well governed and people feel they belong and can contribute and thrive. That the ways of working within councils are enhanced and for conduct that is harmonious and inclusive. That elected officials are supported and trusted to make good community-centred and socially, environmentally and economically responsible decisions. And that the VLGA is valued and respected as the go-to place for elected officials to access standards of good governance, be informed about new and emerging issues, and develop their community leadership and engagement capabilities. I look forward to officially launching the VLGA's 2022 to 2027 strategic plan in later this year or early next year, and providing more detailed information about the key objectives that will make up this plan. In conclusion, to our valued members, supporters and partner organisations, it has been our pleasure to work with you and support you over the past 12 months. We look forward to continuing our work together into the future. I would also like to acknowledge the work of the VLGA CEO, Catherine Arndt, and staff who have continued to raise the bar in the delivery of services to support the local government sector and councils and councillors in achieving the highest standards of governance on behalf of their communities. Thank you. May I have a mover and seconder that my President's report be received? Moved, Anna Olivia Carly-Hannon, and a seconder, Councillor Susan Lawkins. Thank you, Liv and Susan. Again, you will see the motion that the President's report be received in the poll, and I ask that you vote accordingly. Yes, in favour, or no, against. Oh, we've got for and against this time. We've changed it. Well, thank you, everybody. It was unanimously received, and I appreciate that. We now move to item 4 of our agenda, which is receipt of audited 2021-22 financial statements, which incorporates our Treasurer's report from Mr. Andrew Sloman. So I now ask Andrew Sloman to speak to the Treasurer's report and the audited 21-22 financial statements, which have been circulated to you.
Thank you, Denise. Hi, everyone. Again, another challenging year as we transition through the COVID-19 pandemic to a more endemic phase. The key aims really for the year were to maintain an efficient and effective service to our membership and stakeholders, whilst we assured that we maintained a financially sustainable business through the risks and uncertainties that the pandemic in particular presented. I'd like to say congratulations to the VLGA staff for ensuring that we achieve these aims despite those challenges presented. Thank you in particular to Catherine and Sue and the support staff for the high standard of financial statements and accounts and ledger that was presented, and I thank them for that. The VLGA Connect series has continued to serve the organisation and membership well, and we're looking forward to strategically enhancing our digital media and online platforms going forward, while also returning to in-person engagement, which I know you all miss. And as Denise alluded to, we are commencing a new strategic planning period, and I think you will see over the coming months that there are some exciting developments in that area in particular going ahead. The year-end result at 30 June reflects our commitment to the aims above. It also resulted from a slight reduction in operating income from 2021, which was due mainly to the reduction in the federal government pandemic surplus funding. And our operating costs reduced also for year on year due to reduced occupancy and the full effect of the office lease cancellation during the 2021 financial year. And a continued focus on administrative costs also saw a reduction in same year on year. So in summary, our operating income for the year reduced by 10.6% to $1,358,985 to be precise, due largely to, as I said, that non-recurring federal government COVID-19 pandemic subsidy not being received or not being continued. And the bottom line net profit was $297,210 as audited due to the reduced occupancy and administration costs. The VLGA's council membership subscriptions cover the costs associated with the extensive representation to and engagement with government and other stakeholders that the VLGA undertakes on behalf of the local government sector, in addition to underwriting costs of program delivery for member councils. We're exiting the pandemic period and entering a new strategic phase in a healthy financial position. And with that foundation laid, we will shortly share our exciting new strategic aims, as Denise alluded to, with you and our stakeholders. We're very excited by this, and we will be investing to ensure that our commitment and service to you and your governance needs continues at the highest and most innovative levels. Thank you. Yours in good governance. And that is my table, my Treasurer's report.
Thank you, Andrew. If anyone has any items they wish to discuss, please, now is the time. And if there's nothing coming into the chat or questions, then I ask that you will see the motion that the audited 2021 to 2022 financial statements, which incorporates the Treasurer's report, be received. You will see the poll, and I ask for you to indicate either a vote in favour or against. Well, thank you, everybody. It was unanimously received. And thank you, Andrew, for your report. I move to item 5 now, which is confirmation of auditors for the 2022-2023 financial year. Stannard's accountants and advisors are the current auditor. The board sees no reason to discontinue the engagement of Stannard's. We are pleased to have our auditors represented at the AGM, I think by Alex Allen is present today. Thank you, Alex, for coming along. May I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation that Standards Accountants and Advisors be confirmed as auditors for 2022-23 financial year? Moved Andrew Sloman, seconded Louise Hill. And again, we'll move to the poll that Standards Accountants and Advisors be confirmed as auditors for 2022-2023 financial year, and I ask you to either indicate that you're in favour or against. And thank you, everybody. That was unanimously supported. We now move to item 6, which is the CEO's report, the final item for this meeting. And I'm going to pass to Catherine Arndt as our CEO to give her report on the VLGA's 2022 annual report. Catherine.
Thank you, Denise. And I would also like to acknowledge the VLGA's patron, Hayden Raysmith, who has joined us. Unfortunately, due to some technical issues, he was a little bit late coming in, but we do acknowledge and welcome him to the room. Thank you. Well, once again, I am both honoured and humbled to lead the VLGA in its work to support the local government sector in achieving the highest standards of governance on behalf of their communities. Throughout the year and amidst the recovery and emergence from the global pandemic, the VLGA delivered multiple programs engaged in many forums to strengthen and support good governance in local government. The VLGA continued to provide opportunities for councillor networking, professional development and information exchange, while actively engaging with key policymakers and broader stakeholders to inform, influence and lead the conversations that determine the priorities for the local government sector in Victoria. Consistent with the role of the VLGA to support good governance at the local level, the VLGA embarked on an extensive consultation process to inform the organisation's next 5-year strategic plan, and this will be launched hopefully later in the year. The VLGA's overriding value is to strengthen and support good governance in local government that will enable, promote and facilitate trust and confidence in the sector. We continue to deliver our signature VLGA Connect program, both in video and podcast form. Over 300 episodes have been delivered to date. This series, as you might recall, commenced at the outset of the COVID pandemic to provide the sector with a way to stay connected in an online environment and to share crucial information from sector leaders at a time of great uncertainty and challenge. It has since become a highly valued source of interviews and discussion for people within and beyond the local government sector in Victoria. The VLGA Connect family includes the weekly governance update with Chris Eddy and Steve Cooper, in conversation with thought leaders, decision makers and public sector leaders, live panel forums on key topics of importance and relevance to the sector, and global executive live panels, which we do in partnership with Local Government Information Unit, or LGIU. I would like to acknowledge and thank Chris Eddy for his ongoing role in hosting the VLGA series, VLGA Connect series on behalf of the VLGA. I would also like to acknowledge and thank our most valued and beloved production director and editor, John Lloyd Fillingham, or JLF as we know him by. The VLGA is proud to continue our support of the Local Government News Roundup podcast, which was launched last year. This podcast is produced and presented by Chris Eddy, a local government and media veteran of 40 years, and features interviews and news from around the local government sector, both internationally, locally, and also interstate. It has a global following. The VLGA Governance Hotline was another service that was well used by councillors and officers from member councils throughout the year, seeking confidential support on due process, tactics for communication, and implications of the Local Government Act 2020. As Andrew mentioned, membership is a lifeblood of the VLGA. We continue to undertake an active engagement process with our members and key stakeholders, and have worked hard not only to retain our existing members, but also to gain new members. In conclusion, I would like to thank the VLGA President, Councillor Denise Massoud, and the VLGA board for your guidance, input and support. And finally, I would like to recognise and acknowledge the contribution of all VLGA staff and thank them for their resilience, agility, professionalism and support over the past 12 months, especially in the disruptive time of lockdowns and working from home. Your continued support during this time sees me extremely grateful. To our members and supporters, thank you. It has been yet another challenging year for many of you, and I hope you've enjoyed our blend of online engagement and face-to-face programs as we emerge from the shutdowns previously endured, and we look forward to working with you next year. I'd now like to share a short 3-minute video, which I think summarises quite perfectly just the range of work and activities and programs and services that we have delivered over not only the past 12 months, but also in recent months.
Thank you, Catherine, and for the video. It was a great review of the year. I sat here thinking what great events they were and great exchanges and deep conversations that we achieved in so many of those occasions. So I now ask for a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that the Chief Executive Officer's report and annual report for 2021-22 be received. I can see Councillor Francis Eyre and Councillor Dr. Josh Fergus. I saw Councillor Eyre first and seconded Dr. Josh Fergus. We now will go to the poll, and again I ask you to indicate if you are in favour or against that we accept the Chief Executive Officer report. Well, thank you everyone for voting. And of course, it was actually received unanimously. So thank you. And thank you to Ben, who's been running the polls for us as we've been going through the meeting. As there's no further official business, I declare that the 2022 Annual General Meeting is closed. And I now welcome our guest speaker, Mike Gooey, to say a few words. But I'd like to introduce him a little. He's quite new to some of us. I think August was when he moved into the role of Executive Director of Local Government Victoria. Mike is a senior executive with more than 20 years of experience in the public and not-for-profit sectors. He brings deep expertise in corporate strategy and governance, strategic policy, legislation, and partnerships and engagement. He has worked closely with the local government sector over most of his career and is well known to our stakeholders and partners in regional Victoria through his recent roles in rural and regional Victoria. This includes recently working with local governments and regional partnerships on regional economic development strategies and economic recovery programs to address COVID-19 and fire and flood affected areas. Mike was most recently acting as Executive Director at Animal Welfare Victoria and Agriculture Regulatory Policy in the DJPR. His previous roles include executive positions in regional development, water, catchment management, sustainability, transition economy and green jobs, and as CEO of Trust for Nature. He has delivered a variety of flagship initiatives for government and has led large policy and delivery portfolios. Quite an extensive CV, Mike. You're very well qualified for us in local government Victoria. Mike, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Well, yes, thank you, Denise. That is quite a lot, isn't it? Because I'm still quite young as well. No, Wominjeka from Wurundjeri land, part of the Kulin Nation. I pay respects to elders and acknowledge that we actually, as public servants in the round, have a special and privileged position to be in with regard to policies, programs, and leading the way in which we think about how we work with sovereign nations whose sovereignty was never ceded. So I think that we hold a very privileged position across all of our various roles. We should acknowledge that when we do an acknowledgement of country as well. Thank you for that very generous introduction, Denise. It makes me feel tired thinking about all of those things. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity and the honour, really, to be asked to come and speak to this august group. It really is quite humbling, given the breadth of experience that's in the virtual room, because I, as Denise has pointed out, I've pretty much been a policy wonk most of my career, and I think there's, just because I'm amongst friends, some concern that I'm not from the sector. I was talking to Yehudi Blaisher just recently, and I think there's only been a few of us that have headed up local government Victoria that haven't been through the local government system directly. So I suppose probably one of the things that I like to reflect on is I do bring a particular view, having worked with local government in all various manners, but not being a part of it. But I'll dive into some of that in a little minute. But probably just wonderful to be at this meeting, and congratulations and thanks for all the work you do through VLGA. It's really important for the sector, and that little video was just wonderful. I think it gave a really good insight for someone who's new. But also, I think it probably should give you all a pretty good reminder of the busy year that you've had, and the context in which you've done it has been pretty difficult. And also, then, given your roles as local representatives, the work that you do on behalf of your communities is also to be applauded. So I'm really very grateful to have your time. I'm obviously keeping you between. I'm sitting here between an evening drink. So look. Denise has done a really great job of sort of summarising the who I am and where I've come from. So look, I have a fairly long history as a senior executive within state government. and a very long history of working with local governments to deliver some pretty difficult things along the way. So regional partnerships that was one of them. Denise also didn't mention a few of the things which I, strangely enough, the catchment management system from 20 odd years ago was a part of some of the work that I did in the land care program and policy that sit around that. So for me, I've always been really focused on the intersection of, well, what's the best way of putting it? The political, social, environmental, and economic outcomes. I think, and you all as elected representatives, know this world intimately, and a part of my job as a policy wonk is trying to make sense of some of that. So really, for me, I've spent my career trying to think about how do we create public value? What does that look like? And really clearly, it comes down to what's the authorising environment. And of course, working within state government, the authorising environment has a fair few moving parts, because obviously there's the elected representatives from the state and the minister, but then there's also the intersection with the work that happens in local government. So what's actually politically sustainable in the authorising environment is one of those really clear and difficult areas to navigate. And then there is, of course, what's administratively feasible. And I, of course, come from a part of the three-tiered system of government where there is a long history of things being pushed out from the state to local government to deliver without much forethought about what the implications might be. So that sort of systems issue is a really important one. So how do we make sense of the operating environment? And then there's the thing that I've done a lot of in my roles, which is really trying to understand institutional and sector capability to make change. Like, what does that really look like? So that's probably a few of the things that really drive me and really interest me, because local government has lots of opportunities in it. So I'll probably leave it at that, Denise, in the first instance, as to here's who I am, because I understand you've got some questions for me. A grilling, I believe.
I don't think they're grilling questions, but I thank you for sharing, I suppose, what your passions are and your interests are, so that everybody gets to know you a little bit more and understand where you're hoping to be able to affect some good things for local government. My first question, though, is that you have entered the local government sector at an interesting time, on the back of a review into the culture of local government, a change of minister, and that may happen again after the election, in the lead up to the state election. What have your observations of the sector been to date?
Thanks, Denise. Great question. I mean, you're all familiar with the so-called culture review, which is, I find the name slightly alarming, but that's another story. And I think it's interesting because there are certainly, the three big headings in there around experience and capability, the councillor journey, and effective dispute resolution, and what that looks like. Are some of the things that I have been hearing around the traps, which are important, and perhaps we'll talk about some of the detail about that in a minute. But I think one of the really interesting things to me, I've only Minister Horn, of course, only had a few weeks, was only a few weeks ahead of me into the portfolio, and we shared some interesting observations in terms of the big picture issues, I think. So the culture project to one side, I think that there are some really great nuts and bolts things that we need to think about, but the big picture things which are intriguing, and how much of it's the zeitgeist, if you like, or the last couple of years of COVID, but the increasing lack of trust in politicians and government institutions, I think, is probably one of the things that that's not just an observation about local government, but just overall. I think it sets the arena, if you like, for where we find ourselves. I'm also again, because these are the big picture things that I think we should be, I'll say worrying about, but at least thinking about the implications of climate change. And I think they're many and varied. So, possibly, 55 councils currently affected by the floods. It's probably the most widespread weather event that we've had. But what does that really mean in terms of the future for infrastructure, services and insurance? I think that there is a set of both policy questions and real focus on what does that mean for what we do into the future. And then there's the emergency management roles that are put upon local government. I've spent a lot of time both in the agriculture portfolios and in regional development, working in emergency management, in particular in recovery. But I've always been fascinated by the emergency management system and the fact that local governments, of course, are written into the state emergency management plans, but again, probably not with great regard to what that means in terms of capability and resourcing. So there are a few things which have really struck me as I've come into the portfolio that I think are really important. And again, as you've already heard, I'm a bit fascinated by the policy problem that sits with that, but the operational issues that go with that. And what does systemic change look like? Who actually has the levers for that? I think it's all of us. What does that look like? And how do we make those changes? So that's that's a kind of my summary piece, I think, Denise, on that one.
So what have you learned about the sector that has actually surprised you?
Okay, so probably the fantastic and broad range of responsibilities that are delivered by local government. So depending on which numbers you use, the 100 plus services or the 120 plus services or the 140 plus services that that local governments put out their front door, and that is incredible. And so that's probably one of the more surprising things, given, of course, I've been within the state government, often part of the groups that are saying, here's a bunch of things that we think local government can do. Again, that's a problem. So that's one of the things that I think is really, really interesting. So that has shocked me. Is probably one of the things. And because I've been dealing particularly with economic recovery in rural and regional areas over the last couple of years, off the back of COVID and the 1920 fires, the work that has been done by local government, particularly in rural and regional, has really been incredible. And putting aside the fact that I've been a bit critical of state government pushing things down onto local government, I think that the level of collaboration and cooperation between the sectors is amazing. So that's probably one of the things that I've been holding on to. I'll do a bit of a negative, though, in terms of one of the things that has really shocked me is the amount of state government intervention in the sector. I suppose it's, again, because I haven't been close to local government and now having the responsibility for governance and integrity, I find it intriguing in some ways, and I think possibly this is a bit of a symptom, if you like, of one of the big issues around trust in government. But 7 municipal monitors, 2 councils and administration, and obviously just as we were going into caretaker commission of inquiry into Moira, I think that sort of the breadth of issues that come up through governance and integrity are intriguing, but I'm interested in what some of the root causes are, and you as a group actually probably will hold some fantastic insights to that. And then there's the Council Conduct Framework itself. I think the numbers since it started, there's it's been almost 24, I think, arbitration processes that have been brought through. And again, I think that we can talk about the actual process another time, but there's some really interesting questions around all of that. So I have been a bit shocked by that, I think, Denise, to balance up the negative and the positive.
Well, that's right. It's always two sides, aren't there? I guess my next question is that although you've only been in the role a short time, and I know you've been getting around to speak to councils, and councillors and peak bodies as much as you've been able to. What are you hearing about the sector as to the challenges and the opportunities?
Okay, so I reckon there's a couple of things in this, and I'm also just really conscious of time. So I'll do some headline things. Council financial sustainability. So clearly that's a thing, and I'm very aware of it from the rural and regional end, but it's across the board, and the implications of rate capping. I mean, we keep on hearing, the cost of infrastructure is 40% above, the original estimated cost. There's some real implications for that. So that's clearly a big one, and there's got to be an opportunity in making sense of that, particularly as we get advice from the Essential Services Commission and give some consideration to what rate capping looks like along the way. Let's also, I suppose, the political reality is, noting it's in caretaker and everything else, I don't think anybody of any persuasion, any state government would walk away from rate capping. Is probably an interesting issue too, but we can put that to one side. We've already spoken about the emergency management stuff. And again, that's something that I'm really keen to work with local governments on, and then back into the system. I've had actually a number of conversations with Andrew Crisp and the Emergency Management Victoria folk, in particular, Kate Fitzgerald, who looks after the system, as it were. I think that there's more that can be done there. And the other one, which is actually a little, it's a kind of a rats and mice one, but I think is important, is actually the implications of the rollout of the Local Government Act from 2020. So that was sold as this great set of reforms, and there are some really good and interesting things as a part of that. A lot of it's quite administrative, and I think that again the state underestimated the impost on local governments to actually implement a lot of that. So I'm keen to get to dig around under that a bit. So that seems like a bit of a rats and mice one, but I think it's a really important one that I'm really keen to work with local governments on.
Yeah, there's a lot to explore, isn't there? Okay, there may be people present today who are not overly familiar with the structure of LGV and the areas of work that your team focus on. Are you able to provide us with an overview of the LGV structure and key areas of work, particularly as they relate to supporting the local government sector?
It's quite fresh in my mind, given that the staff have been briefing me on what we do, because a lot of those briefings I have quite often gone, we what now? We do that. There are a few things in here which surprise me. So probably not the most important thing, they're all important, but I like to think of it as sort of 5 streams, if you like. So I'll very, very quickly. Sector investment. So most of you will be familiar with the wonderful Colin Morrison, who has been in local government Victoria for nigh on 30 years. He runs the sector development team and the grants commission. So we put through, it's close to $900 million worth of funding into the sector, both from the Commonwealth and from the state. So that's a really important part of our world, and Colin looks after that and all the governance that sits around those granting programs. The sector finance and performance. So that's the annual reporting, everything else that goes in there. You're all very familiar with, and the Know Your Council system that sits on as a part of that. The other sort of couple of streams, though, is of course all the governance things that we've just been talking about. So we are the folk that so I've got a set of lawyers who busily make their way through the legislation and provide advice both to to mayors and CEOs as for interpretation, but then provide advice to the minister on issues of interpretation of the Act, and then implications and implementation of actions out of the Act. And then there's also the emergency management stuff. So again, I imagine most of you would be familiar with Dan Harper, who has been in the sector for a long time and is the key go-to. He's currently sitting in the State Control Centre because of the floods, and so they're kind of the 5 streams of key work that we do, Denise. And it's challenging to keep it all moving in the one direction, noting that we're servicing 79 of you as well.
Well, Mike, thank you. Now, you've actually highlighted a lot of, I suppose, interesting things, opportunities, etc. And following the state election, there will be a new local government minister, and it may or may not be the same person. So at a high level, if you can share this information, what will be the key focus points of your brief to the incoming local government minister following the state election?
There's probably no secrets in it all, because I've probably spoken about most of it, really. I think so. Sector sustainability. I think that to me seems to be a really big issue, and it's not only for local governments in and of themselves, but actually local government Victoria itself. Most of you, in fact, many of you would have a much better and deeper understanding of this. I'm amongst friends quietly. This is it's a difficult portfolio. It is fair to say that the ability for the local government minister to go in and influence their colleagues has always been pretty hard. So the machinery is a bit run down in some ways, and making sure that we have the right investment within local government Victoria so we can support the sector is going to be one of the clear things that I will be pitching to a new minister. But all of that then is around making sense of what the services are that the state should be facilitating and supporting, and making, having the right scaffolds for local government to deliver the services that you do, and to make the decisions that you need to. So that then hinges, of course, on good governance reform, and what does that look like? And my throwaway line earlier around the system looks to me to be pretty clunky. We kind of go from the Council of Conduct panel, monitors, the CMI, commissions of inquiry. There's this continuum really that runs from advisory to investigatory. So putting aside all of the other integrity bodies, but I'm interested in what that looks like and what good governance reform looks like. And that'll be a key part of what I will be briefing an incoming minister about, because I think, again, as I was saying earlier, what's our role from a state perspective, but also how do we make sense of that across the sector? So I think that, that for me, I reckon is a key job for the state, is to ensure that we've got systems and processes, and again, the architecture that helps make sense of good governance.
Well, it leads well into the next question, which I think many people are wondering about, and that is they're interested to understand what the next steps will be following the culture review.
Well, the culture review. Short of the fact I really dislike the name, there is a Chairman Mao aphorism that goes along the lines of, whenever I hear someone mention culture, I reach for my gun. Probably not appropriate to say that out loud, but so the culture review in and of itself, thank you, Louise. The culture review, as I said, we're all very familiar with the sort of the three main parts of it, and all of them need investment and work. Again, part of my briefing to an incoming minister will be to help make sense of the what's our approach here. I want to make sure that, again, I know that we've had all the peaks in the room previously to talk about who has responsibilities here, but I actually think so. I'm keen to take a much more action planning or an action-oriented approach to this, where we can actually, put some very clear responsibilities on a page and say, well, VLGA, you'll do X and Y, MAV, A, B, C. The state government will do these things. Noting that we're all doing this in a resource-constrained environment. So I think that that's actually, again, often resource-constrained environments can lead to some of the best innovation, but we have to make space to do that. We've got to be able to have really honest, clear conversations that help get to the underlying issues, and that takes a lot of trust. And so it takes a lot of time as well, often, but that's really just about building the trust. I think actually once you've got the trust, the cut to the chase for the actions is usually pretty fast. So that's probably really the key thing for me, Denise, in this one, is that for the culture review, I want to make it much more real for people with a set of actions, noting that all the peaks and the state government have to be really clear about what they are and take those responsibilities up.
Yeah, I think you made some very good comments there. Mike, is there anything else you would like to raise and share with the room?
Look, given the time, there are so many things, but probably one of the key things that I will just leave you with is clearly I love a chat. So I would, I would very happily take a call, come and have a cup of tea, because really the insights that you as a group and as individuals hold are really important to helping make sense of what reform looks like, what's the best for the sector, how do we do that? It's not always the most efficient way of doing it, I know that, and we all know that, but also it's an important part of both making the relationships, but really having a clear sense of what is the sector's view. So look, I'm up for a chat. I can also talk under wet cement with a mouthful of marbles. So often people just have to tell me to shut up. That's the other thing. I've made that very clear with Catherine and Louise when we were meeting the other week. Mike, just take a breath now. So really keen to catch up, have discussions, and really make sure that we, as a group of leaders, have a really good sense of where we want the sector to go. What's the trajectory that really makes sense for getting great outcomes for local communities?
Mike, all I can say is thank you for making your time available for us so generously and speaking at our AGM. The VLGA looks forward to working with you and the Local Government Victoria team to progress the initiatives and policy that will further support local government sector. So thank you very much for being with us today.
I know. Thank you very much, and thanks to the VLGA team, and thank you, councillors, for being so generous with your time. It's I really do appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, and any future opportunities that we get.
Thanks, Mike. Well, that concludes the VLGA's 2022 annual general meeting. I thank you all for your participation and ongoing support. The VLGA looks forward to officially launching our strategy for 2022 to 2027. And that strategic plan is just getting the final sort of print and whatever, but it is done and it is very exciting. And we will very much look forward to launching it with all of you. And I wish you all a safe and a pleasant evening. And as we approach Christmas, again, hopefully some better weather, less rain, and all having a great holiday period. Thank you very much for joining us today.